Every nationality has their lovely mince dish. We have the warming cottage pie. The Mexicans have their fiery chili. I'm going to show you an Indian mince dish, and this is called lamb keema. My version, I like to put a few chunky mushrooms in there, but if you wanted to, you could put other vegetables in there too, some peppers maybe. The first thing I'm going to do is heat up a little bit of vegetable oil in my wide base pan. So I like to use almost like a frying pan for this dish, just because it's got a nice wide base, and because this is a fairly dry dish, so that it's not got a lot of sauce in it, a wide base works better. What we're going to do is add our finely sliced onions. I'm going to fry that on a fairly high heat to start with, because what I want to happen is I want any liquid that's in there, any water, to be drawn out. Once that's been cooking for a little while, I'm going to go in with my garlic. And what I've got here is 4 cloves of garlic that I've chopped up really quite finely. Because this is a lamb dish, you can go a little bit heavier on the garlic, just because it works with lamb, having that sort of extra garlic kick. I'm aiming for my onions to go a lovely golden brown colour, and that will form the basis of my masala sauce. And then I'll start to add all my other spices and other flavours into the dish. The onions and garlic have been cooking for about 5 minutes, and what I've done is add a little splash of water every time I think they're catching on the bottom. What that does is it helps them to caramelise, and it just lifts everything off the bottom of the pan. What you don't want to do is keep adding little bits of oil, because you don't want your dish to be greasy. And I think we're going to start to add all of our other ingredients in. The first thing I'm going to do is put some ginger, which I've grated, probably about a tablespoon. I'm going to turn it down a little bit, because ginger has a tendency to catch on the bottom of the pan because it's fairly fibrous. Into that, I'm going to add 200 grams of plum tomatoes, just from a tin. I like to use whole plum tomatoes, just because they give a lovely sauce. Using my spoon, just try to bash those up and break them up so that they melt into the onions, and you end up with a really nice thick sauce. General rule of thumb with spices is once you've got your liquid in there, you can start to add your ground spices. So into that, for some flavour, I'm going to pop in a teaspoon of salt for seasoning. I'm going to put half a teaspoon of turmeric for the lovely iconic curry colour. Stir that through. Just turn your heat down a little bit if it's starting to get too hot. And the other bits I'm going to add into there are some cumin seeds. I'm going to put in a teaspoon of cumin seeds, just to give a little bit of earthiness. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give those a crush. I'm going to break them up using my pestle and mortar. You don't need to get a fine powder. You just want to bruise them. You just want to start to smell the aromatics and the oils being released. And then you're good to go. So that's what you're looking for, just a rough crush of those seeds. I'm also going to pop in my chilli, and I'm going to use 3 chilies because I know my chilies are fairly mild. You can go in with however much you like. If you want it mild, then just use 1 or 2. If you want it slightly more spicy, then just add a few more. Just make sure you chop them up nice and fine, because you don't want big chunky bits of chili when you bite down into the dish. The other thing you can do is you can put chili in now. You can have a little taste later on, and if you want it a little bit more fiery, then you can add some chili powder in later. So I'm just going to go in with my chilies. And stir that through. So your masala paste should now be starting to get really fragrant and really thick and delicious, where all of the onions and tomatoes and all of the spices are starting to melt in together. Okay, so once you've got a really nice shiny paste like this, once you've got your masala done, I'm going to go in with my mushrooms. If you don't want to use mushrooms, then by all means just miss them out. I've got about 10 mushrooms here that I've just quartered, and I like to keep them nice and chunky because it just adds to that meatiness of this dish. So I'm just going to pop those in. And what I'm going to do is turn up my heat to quite a high heat. And the reason I'm doing that is mushrooms are very liquidy. They've got quite a lot of water in them. And I want that water to almost come out of the mushrooms so that they don't have that squeaky feel at the end. I'm just going to cook those for about 5 minutes or so on a fairly high heat. I've let the mushrooms cook down for about 5 minutes. They're looking really nice now. So into that, I'm going to pop in my minced lamb. Ideally, go for a really lean minced lamb because you don't want this to be a really fatty dish, but try and go for a nice lean one. Once you've got your mince in, just try and break it up and get it coated with that masala sauce. You don't want to end up with big lumps, so use your spoon and just break up any big bits. That will start to brown. So once it's all coated like that, once you're happy, I'm going to pop the lid on just for a few minutes, just to let it cook. And I'm going to turn it down just so that it's on a fairly low simmer. Okay, so that's all coated beautifully. I'm going to pop the lid on and just let that cook away for about 5 or 6 minutes. I can smell that the mince is ready. That's looking lovely. So it's ready now for the peas to go in, and all I'm using is just garden peas, just frozen peas, just for a little bit of sweetness, and they look really beautiful in this dish. So just sprinkle those in and give them a stir through just to coat them again with the lovely sauce. Look at that. They add a real sweetness. If you want to use fresh peas, by all means use fresh peas, but you'll need to cook the dish for a little bit longer. I'm going to leave that in there for another 5 minutes before I add my final touches. I'm going to finish the dish off with some garam masala, just to bring all of those lovely flavours together. A nice big heaped teaspoon. It's looking lovely. Give that a stir through. If you find that you've got a lot of liquid still in there, you can just turn the heat up and just dry that liquid off, because this is the sort of consistency you're looking for. And just to finish that off, and just as a final garnish, I'm going to put some fresh coriander all the way through, just for a little bit of freshness. Sprinkle that in, and then we're good to serve. It looks delicious. This is the dish that I eat when I want my meaty curry fix, but I haven't got enough time to make a full-on lamb curry. So next time you've got some mince in the fridge, rather than your bolognese, why don't you try something new?